Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Continuing my discussion of institutions and institutionalism, there's always more to say, particularly in this little talk. I'm going to speak more on the topic of why I remain within an institution, the institution that I've been in for most of this life, with which my relationship is somewhat patchy, maybe stormy. A few more thoughts on that. In some ways, maybe objectively speaking, in many ways, it doesn't make sense to remain within a movement that I feel in many ways uncomfortable with, in many ways cannot relate to. What I see as the ideal that Srila Prabhupada started this movement with seems to be increasingly compromised. And again, it's not just me who feels like that. It's almost like I'm hoping against hope, clutching at straws of the movement getting back to what Srila Prabhupada, by his own instructions, wanted it to be, getting back on the track. Of course, it's not that we can just make some nostalgic time travel and go back to the 1960s or 1970s. And even if we were to do so, we would find that it wasn't all heaven in those days either. There's so many problems within the movement. But the general direction that Srila Prabhupada gave seems to be, to a large extent, compromised. And I quoted from Srila Prabhupada talking about when the Acharya disappears, then various persons in the guise of swamis, yogis, philanthropists, and welfare workers, they more or less hijack the movement. Hijack wasn't the word that Srila Prabhupada used. They introduce unauthorized principles, Srila Prabhupada said. So that seems to be almost prophetic, seeing the situation that is going on now. So why don't I just say maybe some misplaced idealism, hoping for a miracle. Krishna can make miracles. But then we see that if we look at the history of religious movements, that they can have their ups and downs, and the first few hundred years of Christianity were very stormy, and the next few hundred years were stormy, and they're still stormy, and the things going on. We may think, well, it's divorced from the actual principles that Christ gave, but some people get it. For all the deviation from what Christ gave, there are still, throughout the generations, very sincere people who want to develop love of God, although that was that's true, that was largely forgotten. When Srila Prabhupada came to England, he was asked, why have you come here? And Srila Prabhupada said, to teach what you have forgotten, which is love of God. Anyway, I'm speaking now, and if I have a platform to speak from, and some prominence is there within that platform. I'm talking about the ISKCON platform. Who's watching this now? Who's listening to this? It's mostly people who have become affiliated with ISKCON. And it's not just because of me, it's because of the institution that Srila Prabhupada set up and has been continued, for better or worse, by tens of thousands of devotees all over the world who are sustaining and expanding this network. It's not wholly and solely by any means because of me that you, whoever's listening to this, are listening. You didn't come just because of me. There's a whole network out there, of which I've also been a player in that, but I'm a player in it. I'm not the whole, the whole and the soul and the life and soul of the party by any means. And those who are sustaining this ISKCON movement throughout the world, at least at some level, we all basically agree on the same things. Hopefully, we all agree on the same things. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Srila Prabhupada is his special empowered representative. We should follow Srila Prabhupada. I don't think anyone within ISKCON, practically you can't be a member of ISKCON unless you at least verbally subscribe to these basic principles. Now, as a sannyasi, I have to speak, and Srila Prabhupada, in one letter, I believe it was, stated that sannyasis should preach to the devotees especially, who are already within the movement, and the other members of the movement should preach to the outsiders more. So I have a duty also to speak to those who have come with good faith in Srila Prabhupada and his movement. What I say may not be appreciated by everyone within the movement. Some do, some don't. A lot, they don't care at all because they don't have a small percentage are listening to me. But anyway, it's not that I'm out to be the Acharya, the savior of the world. It's a group effort. And still, throughout the world, the great majority of people who take to Krishna consciousness do so via the medium of ISKCON. The devotees are practicing at different levels, and there are other Vaishnava groups throughout the world, but still, for newcomers, it's mostly through ISKCON. And we all believe in these basic principles, Krishna and Krishna consciousness as given by Srila Prabhupada. What exactly that means to follow Srila Prabhupada, that's where the contention comes in. Because, I don't agree that our movement should pose itself as a yoga teaching movement or Bhakti yoga, but yoga as it's generally understood, or a feed the children to build up the nation movement, or an eye camp movement, or just promoting compassion and love without specific reference to the teachings of Bhagavad Gita. Ashochanan vasochang twang pragya vadang chabhashase gatasuna gatasuna nanu shochanti panditaha. The idea of compassion is very nice, and people who are somewhat pious and spiritually inclined, if we talk of compassion, they'll like that. But then we find at the very beginning of the Bhagavad Gita that Lord Krishna, he chastised Arjuna for Arjuna's conception of compassion, which is based on ignorance of the existential position of the soul. And that forms the beginning of Bhagavad Gita. So it is trendy to go around and be spiritual and talk about compassion. The Dalai Lama, he's a the, not just the Dalai Lama, who shows his compassion for all living beings by eating some of them every day. He's a meat eater. So he talks a lot about compassion. And it's trendy to follow the Dalai Lama or to whatever there is to follow. And if we talk about compassion, then maybe we'll pick up some more superficial people who are interested in compassion without a clear grounding in Krishna consciousness. So I'm getting off a bit because I'm just supposed to be speaking in a general way, but I'm just giving a general idea of the kind of things I deeply disagree with, because some of the most prominent and respected members of ISKCON at the present time are doing all these garbage things like talking about compassion without specifically relating it to the position of the soul in relation to Krishna as given in Bhagavad Gita. And there are so many bogus things. And directly sympathizing with atheism and all kinds of very, very bad things, which I don't know how it's going on in the name of Srila Prabhupada, but it is. The great hope is that despite all this nonsense going on in the name of ISKCON, which means in the name of Srila Prabhupada, that people will actually read Srila Prabhupada's books and see what he has to say, and accept Srila Prabhupada as Arjuna accepted Krishna. Sarvametad ritang manye yanmang vadisi Keshava. The Achilles heel of today's New Age ISKCON is Srila Prabhupada's books. If people read Prabhupada's books, we should encourage. If they read Prabhupada's books, they'll understand this is actually the absolute truth. And this is what Srila Prabhupada came to give. So that's always a hope. At least if we subscribe to the name of Srila Prabhupada, then the great hope is that people will actually read Srila Prabhupada's books and take Srila Prabhupada at face value. And there's another danger that we get Srila Prabhupada interpreted by others. There's somewhat danger in the whole education thing going on in ISKCON at the present time. Also, that devotees, they go through their Bhakti Shastra course and this and that, and they think, well, now I studied Prabhupada's books. But it's not the same as, and it's definitely not a substitute for sitting down and reading from beginning to end. It's somewhat equivalent to, if you just go through the Bhakti Shastra course without actually studying Srila Prabhupada's books from beginning to end, it's something like you have to do in your exam, you have to write about Twelfth Night, a drama by Shakespeare. That's one thing I had to do in my English literature O-level. That was one of the books. And we actually went through the whole of the drama. But you can also get notes on, which just notes on Twelfth Night for students. And then whatever they're going to ask you questions about, that much you can, that much you can study, and then you don't have to actually read the book at all. And I was reading something recently, where some Buddhist was stating, or a scholar of Buddhism was stating that in his opinion, so many misunderstandings arise about the sacred texts because people don't actually read them. They read what others have to say about them, but they don't study the original texts themselves. So that can be a danger also, that we hear from others what Srila Prabhupada has to say, but we don't take the trouble to actually personally hear what Srila Prabhupada has to say, or by the time we get to what Srila Prabhupada has to say, we've already got so many preconceptions. Just like someone, they may come to study the Bhagavatam, but if they first of all have heard some preconception that actually there's no such person as Vyasadeva, and it's some the Bhagavatam is highly prized by the Gauriya Vaishnava sect of Vaishnavism, which is a sect of Hinduism. If we come from that approach, then without that reverence for the Bhagavatam, for the truths that it gives, we just see it as the products of some sect of people, some other human beings, then we won't be able to get the benefit of studying Bhagavatam. So if we also take Srila Prabhupada through the lens of others who are compromised with secular outlook or impersonalistic outlook, who tend to think that, they may not say it directly, but tend to think that Srila Prabhupada is a mundanely conditioned soul, then it becomes very difficult to communicate, as I am supposed to do as a disciple of Srila Prabhupada. I'm supposed to communicate his message, not my message. So why should I not leave? Well, there are so many sincere souls within this movement. Saintly association, that's there also. It's not impossible for me to start afresh, even at this age. There's the lizard. Maybe I should, if we go by lizardology. Srila Prabhupada started afresh at an older age than myself. He didn't really plan to do so. It just became a necessity. I don't feel that it's at this stage it's become a necessity for myself. If I were to start a new movement, then what's the guarantee it wouldn't become corrupt, even in my own lifetime? What to speak of after I pass away? Maybe for some time it could do something. I am within a movement in so many things I disagree with, but I'm able to make my own space within that and to operate within that with various projects I'm overseeing and various devotees I'm involved with. Otherwise, frankly, if I had to live in an atmosphere where much of what is considered normal in ISKCON today, if I had to live in that atmosphere, I don't know if I could. I might just go nuts. If just like, for instance, a few years ago, after Mangalarti at ISKCON in Vrindavan, Krishna Balaram Temple, it was announced in the morning announcements that the basketball team from the Bhaktivedanta Gurukul has reached the semi-final of the state school basketball championships. And we request all the devotees to pray, to bless them and pray to Krishna Balaram that they can be successful. And wait a minute, this is definitely not the movement that I joined. Well, I guess they won't be announcing that now because the Bhaktivedanta Gurukul has been completely separated from the Krishna Balaram temple and is being pretty much converted into a secular school with the government curriculum directly against Srila Prabhupada's orders. And if I say like this, then some people get very, very upset and they really don't like me at all for just pointing out that Srila Prabhupada explicitly said to never to introduce the government curriculum in the Vrindavan Gurukul, and now it's been done. So if I point this out, it's not appreciated very much. So I'm within a movement, but I'm in my own space, and that's just one example, the basketball announcement, but so many things I can't relate to. The devotees with all the modern hairstyles, playing their djembe drums, and with T-shirts with all kinds of mundane motives on them, and Hare Krishna. Anyway, Hare Krishna. I'm idealistic. There is hope. As long as there's life, there's hope. Srila Prabhupada's books, they have life. They're strong, positive, surcharged with Krishna. They're the great hope. As I heard Srila Prabhupada say, I was attending a Bhagavatam lecture he gave in Vrindavan in 1976. One of the things Srila Prabhupada says, you should make Srimad Bhagavatam your life. And that really resonated with me. So if we can make or bring this consciousness to, we already have a huge network, a tremendous infrastructure all over the world. Just if we can make this, just put this point, let the teachings of Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada's ecstasies, his devotional ecstasies, let that again be the center of the movement, and the public face of the movement also, what Prabhupada wanted. We may say, well, behind closed doors, we do chant Hare Krishna, but then presenting ourselves to the public as yoga teachers and poor feeders, feeding poor people, not for me. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Vancha kalpa tarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo. Dante nitaya churnakang padyo nipatya kritva chakakushatameta bravimi. Hey sadhava sakala eva vihayata Gauranga Chandra Charne. Hare Krishna.